Dave's 5 Hot Takes, yeah! Hey everybody, welcome back to another interview edition of Dave's 5 Hot Takes. So glad you guys are back, ringing a bell while the Fly Girls yell, you know what I'm saying? In living color, anybody? So this week is really fun because this is a sister from a different mister. This is one of my dearest friends in Nashville, Lucie Silvas. Lucie is artist with a capital A, and that's the best compliment I can give. She is so creative. She's an incredible songwriter, incredible singer, incredible piano player. And if you get to see her live, she will blow your mind. She's such an insanely good performer. But even better than that, she's one of my favorite people. She's one of the best human beings that I know. She and her husband, John, are two of my favorite people in the world. Just to brag on her a little bit, and we talk about this more in the interview, so I'm going to try not to give too much away, but she was raised in New Zealand before they moved to London. Her family moved to London, and there she kind of cut her teeth in the English music scene. Before she got her deal, she sang backup for people, which is really fun to hear her tell these stories. But she's also, when she moved to Nashville later in life, she has now written for Miranda Lambert, Kelly Clarkson, Trisha Yearwood. I don't know if you've heard of those new acts here in Nashville. But Lucie has this sort of incredible magnetic quality to her that when you meet her, you just kind of like, you just sort of love her. She's just the best. And one of the coolest stories that I saw coming out of music in the last couple of years is that Brandy Carlisle, who I love and have done shows with myself, met Lucie and just fell in love with her and did this really cool thing where she basically said, Lucie, I want to open some shows for you. And she did this with some other artists too, to just help expose people to some of her friends like Lucie. And Lucie did a couple of these shows where literally Brandy would come out and do, a set, and then she'd give the stage to Lucie, which, man, props to Brandy. I could get choked up thinking about that kind of benevolence. But that's just how Lucie is. If you ever meet her or see her or get to see her, please try to get to talk to her because she's one of the best people in the world. But again, she's phenomenally talented. It says she's had songs in over 14 TV shows. It's amazing. She's getting it done. She's doing her thing, and her albums are incredible. If you get a chance to listen to her music, it is incredible. So I'm so excited to share this fun conversation with her and some of her hysterical hot takes and stories. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Lucie Silvas. Here we are again on Dave's 5 Hot Takes, and this is a joy for me. I've been looking forward to this episode for a long time. This is one of my dearest friends in the world. She's maybe one of the most talented people that I know. She's one of the most benevolent people. I just said benevolent. Benevolent.
Yeah. That's such a wonderful word to start the day.
Thank you. I knew you'd like that. That's why I said it. And she's just an incredible singer-songwriter. Lucie Silvas, everybody.
Hello. That's a very sweet intro. Thank you, Dave.
I'm going to do like a pro intro before this. So that's when you're going to hear it. And I'm going to just gush and gush. It's going to be 30 minutes long in different languages.
Amazing.
It's going to be...
make sure Portuguese is in there.
Yes.
Very complicated.
It is very complicated. It feels like a train wreck of other langes.
They've just mashed it all together because they couldn't decide.
Yeah. They couldn't. How you doing?
Can you hear a lawnmower? Yeah, life is really good. Can you hear that lawnmower?
Yeah, that's exciting. It just means people are working. We support that.
I don't know if it's in our yard. It's definitely not in our yard. Anyway, I'm good. I'm really good.
You don't know if it's your.
I don't know. It's like, because there's lots of, we're surrounded. There's like lots of,
You're surrounded by lawns.
We're surrounded by a lot of grass, which is nice because you want to be. You want to be amidst nature, Anyway,
that's where your inspiration comes
I'm good, but I'm better for seeing you. I literally feel like I haven't seen you in probably a decade.
Yeah, it feels that way.
As you can see, we've picked up some nice habits of being really tidy people.
So people can't see. So here's the good thing about this, that we do this through Squadcast. Shout out to Squadcast. So you and I can see each other, but thankfully people can't see us because this isn't recorded video-wise. So the good thing about you and I right now, Luce, is that we can look like whatever. And you can look, I don't think it looks like a hoarder's house. I'm on the border of worrying about you, but I'm not worrying. You know what I mean? Like, I'm right on the cusp of... Is everything okay with you guys? Asking that question in a very sincere way, but at least everybody listening can't see that.
When someone doesn't vocalize that when they're worried about you, when they sort of there's that look on their face with it, like, should I be concerned?
It's like a slight squint,
just a little squint, and you're like, okay. It's that kind of like, I haven't got something on my face, but there's something on my face that they think could be something,
or there's something in my life that
Is there something in your life?
Okay, so Lucie, so yours is a pretty fascinating story, because you're from England. You were born on Kingston upon Thames.
It sounds like Game of Thrones, doesn't it?
Does, yeah, it does. It's very exciting, especially to an American like me, because anything upon anything is so exciting.
Doesn't make sense.
We don't have adjectives that describe where we live in
That's
in America.
So true. I hadn't even thought about it like that.
So you were there because your story is so fascinating. So you lived in England, but you also lived in New Zealand, and you've lived a bunch of places.
Yes.
But you were born in England.
I was, yes. I was born, as you said, in Kingston upon Thames, which I do love that expression because it feels like you were born on a houseboat, sort of like
on the Thames.
On the Thames. But it's such a cool, regal way to say it. But yes, I was born there. My parents, even before I was born, had traveled everywhere. They'd live in Kenya. They'd lived in Australia. My mum's Scottish. My dad's English. And my sister, actually Mia, 2 months after she was born, they took her and moved to the Seychelles. They were just I don't know.
Wait, I don't know what that is. Tell me what that is.
An island. So it's basically an island. I think it's. This geography is going to be awful by me, but it feels like Indian Ocean.
Okay.
But I could be very wrong about that, and somebody correct me on my awful geography. But
so what is that about there? Is it just wanderlust?
It was a mixture of my dad's job. And, my dad's always been, I don't know, it's like, maybe this is where I get it from, but my dad is sort of, I don't get my logic from him. That's for sure. I don't have any logic, but he is a very sort of logical, pragmatic person, but he's also a big risk taker. He's always sort of, so you can present him with an idea that seems utterly bonkers. And I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but he will pursue it. To try it. And I've always admired that about him. And I feel like that's what took him to all those places, because he got offered these opportunities. And some of them were short-lived, and some of them, I mean, the amazing part about it is he took an entire family with him on these expeditions.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it's not like he was a lone wolf that just decided. He married a woman who grew up in a very sort of strict and structured family, and yet she kind of just jumped on and went to all these places with him. And then he took his kids with him when we were all born. So
I feel like one of the things that I always get so envious about my friends who are from Europe is that it just feels like, if you're from Europe, you just see that part of the world. It's like, yeah, you can go anywhere at any time. Let's go live in Spain. Let's take a weekend in France. Let's go to where in America, because it's such a big landmass, you do look at America and go, hey, we could go to Arizona for a week, or, but it's just, you don't see the world as a playground, where I think Europeans have they do such a good job of going like, hey, let's pop over to Portugal to surf for 3 days. And then we'll fly back home to London. It just feels like, my friends who are English, like, follow like on Instagram, and they're popping up all over that part of the world because you can.
Right.
Exactly. And it doesn't feel, because to me, it feels like, whoa, that's risky. Like you're traveling the world when it's like
borders. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Crossing borders. Can hear you're one huge country that feels like you've got places all over Europe within one place. So it's like you go to Colorado, you get something. You go to Oregon, you get something. You go to upstate New York, or you go, right up to the top past, Martha's Vineyard and all that stuff. And Louisiana. It feels like you're in, 50 different countries. It's quite incredible. And I understand. I mean, I've gotten to tour a lot now in America, and I haven't even touched the surface of the places that I want to see in the States.
Yeah.
But you're right, Europe, it used to be, it's a train ride. You train ride to Paris, a train ride to, you can take a train under the English Channel to Calais, and then you drive to Holland, or you drive to Belgium. And it is amazing. It feels, it's exciting. I'll still see it as exciting, even though they've made it really easy now that you can do that. But I think it's something that everyone should experience, obviously, when we're not in a huge global pandemic.
Yeah. So do you feel like growing up that way? I'm always fascinated about this musically. Like, Because I mean, would you call they're not professional musicians, but I mean, would you call them musical people?
To an extent, yes. We're definitely in a musical family. They never did it. Well, my mom, when she was 17, 18, was in a band and she played bass, which blows my mind.
Oh my gosh,
I never saw her pick up a bass in my lifetime. She's actually an amazing singer. She's got a beautiful voice. And she was very much into... They had a very impressive record collection. And my mom was into Nat King Cole, Judy Garland. Wow. She was into Gene Kelly and all his movies. And so I was into all those sort of crooners, Tony Bennett. I remember seeing Tony Bennett across sort of like an event that we were at. And I saw him, and out of everybody in the room, I was completely starstruck. I was like, wanted to say hello, but John was like, go say hi. I was like, I can't. I was like so starstruck by Tony Bennett. And my dad was all about the Beach Boys and the Beatles and the Jackson 5 and Roy Orbison and, and Aretha Franklin and Ray Charles and all that kind of stuff. And the Carpenters. I think I must know every Carpenter song there.
You know what's crazy about you too, Luce, is like, I feel like as you name those artists, I know this sounds crazy, but I really feel like I can hear them in how from everybody, like you said, Judy Garland and... Right? Didn't you say Judy Garland?
Judy Garland.
Yeah. But like Judy Garland all the way to Tony Bennett to the Carpenters, to the Beach Boys. And it's funny because knowing you so well, knowing your music so well, I can actually, and Roy Orbison, like I can hear those people in your singing, which is crazy to think about. So when did the bug, so you grew up mostly in England, right? You were there for kind of formative years. I grew
up, and when I was 8 years old, we went to New Zealand. So that's the crazy part. I have a huge family on my dad's side. 2 brothers married 2 sisters. So if you imagine it, one of the couples went to New Zealand and one went to England. So there's my family, all the same last name in England and New Zealand. So my dad grew up in partly Australia and New Zealand, and his dad grew up in New Zealand just for part of his childhood. But they weren't born there. It was my dad's, the other side of the family in New Zealand, obviously all New Zealand natives. But so we moved there, and I spent my early school years there. My sisters spent sort of some of their teenage years, which felt much more, that kind of got ingrained into them, and I don't think it ever left them. But we did come back to England. We ran into some real, family financial struggle. It was really hard. This is another thing that's been a huge influence in my life. My dad, we didn't grow up wanting for anything. We weren't like a wealthy family, but we didn't grow up with nothing either. But there was one stage where we lost everything, had to come back to England. And if you think about, this is kind of a boring detail, but the exchange rate between New Zealand and England, if you have, a pound, it's $3 in New Zealand. Imagine going the other way when you've lost everything. Yeah. So we came back, and my dad, when I look back at it now, it took him probably a decade to get us back on our feet, but he did. We lived with cousins and friends and were separated as a family. But New Zealand was like, I can just remember total joy living there. I didn't have any music around. I had maybe school productions, but it was a very joyful place to grow up as a kid. It was very laid back, very, 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 very laid back. I think that influenced me a lot.
For those people who have not been, which a lot of people haven't been to New Zealand, I mean, it's so far away from the States. Yeah. It is, Annie and I had the chance to go to the South Island, and we were there for about a week, and it is, I've never been anywhere prettier. And we called it God's greatest hits. It was like, it just felt like on one island, you had beautiful mountains to gorgeous sea, to plains, to rivers, to, it just felt like everything that you could sort of do as a highlight of a earth or a water feature. As we call it.
Totally.
It was just gorgeous. You'd come over some mountain pass into just like, it looks ocean. Like, I mean, I hate to say this, but it looks like Lord of the Rings. It's where they,
it does.
And the world are shot there.
And yeah, absolutely. And it's like America when you think about surf to ski, but put on a tiny little island, tiny little islands, which have maybe a max of 4 million people. And it's, it's a volcanic island. Yep. So you see all those, some active, but some dormant, like Hawaii, it's like those dormant volcanoes, and you feel like you're right in the thick of what could be a natural disaster at any minute, but you're lit. That kind of makes you feel more alive because of that.
Right. And, which is like going to one of my shows.
Absolutely.
So when does the bug happen? Because, some of my favorite pictures of you are of you and John Green, in England,
Oh my
in the
goodness.
various iterations of bands or cover bands you guys were in. And if you guys, listen or hear the James Bay episode, we talk about John a lot, but so when does the bug, is that sort of when you get back to England that you really start to lean into this? And when could you sing? Like when, that's sort of a dual question, but were those the same time? Was that something that sort of one made the other,
I don't remember a specific time. I just remember always singing. And I'm sure a lot of singers and musicians would say that they can't see a sort of tipping point. But there was always music in my house. My sisters sing, my dad sings. It was constant singing around me since 2 years old. So I remember, being back in England, I was 4 years old. We had a piano. I played the piano. I wasn't good at it, but we played it and we were encouraged all the time. And
wow.
I think my parents were musical, and it went back. My grandma used to sing in church on my Scottish side. And then my other, the Jewish side, they were very much into their music. And so I think it was encouraged, but it wasn't until I kind of I was very late to the table. I hear of kids, especially these days, starting at 13 years old, starting to make a record. I'm like, oh my, I didn't have any musical experiences till I was about 16. But I did go on stage, I think at 10 years old. I was at some holiday with my parents and I got up on stage, and it was one of those, all family inclusive holidays. And I got up on stage and sung a Whitney Houston song. And I know what my voice was like. It was very, it would hurt your ears now, but at the time, it probably seemed like a big voice for a 10-year-old,
Well, so because this is the thing. I'm
sorry about the lawnmower.
Oh my God. I thought that was like a concert for a second. I was like, is somebody like
a chainsaw or a concert?
It's East Nashville. Who knows what's happening?
I know.
But the thing about you, Lucie, is you are, and I tell you this all the time, but you are without a doubt one of the greatest singers that I know. Like
that's too
you are such an incredible. So did you have a point when either yourself or someone in your circle went, wow, like you can really, like you have a really good voice? Like what was that? Was it just that you had sung so long, everybody was used to you singing well, and then you just started to do your artist thing? Or, do you have like a moment where you were like, wow, okay,
I could do this maybe? I used to watch, Aretha Franklin and Whitney and all those people on stage and see as singers, it was just, it felt so liberating. It's funny to know why you look at something and feel like you want to be there. Like I always loved the idea of being on stage, but I was quite a shy kid other than that. I wasn't real extroverted in a classroom or in a room. I didn't mind having attention on me, but I didn't necessarily seek it. I wasn't the funny person or the extroverted person, but stage seemed to me like another world. Like literally, if you step on stage, you're in another universe. But the first time I think anyone ever gave me an opening to think I could do it for a career was for real. Beyond dreams was I met a friend called Annie at college. I think I was just turning 17. Her dad had a studio in the back of his yard, and his wife happened to be the singer called Judy Zook, an amazing singer-songwriter who had a couple of hits and is to this day one of the most prolific songwriters I've ever heard. She didn't necessarily achieve the fame of someone like Joni Mitchell, but to me, she was of that caliber. She was, wow. And I went to the band and Annie said, will you sing my dad a song? And I was so shy about it. I was like, well, and he said, do you write songs? I said, yeah, but they're not very good. And I'm not a really great musician. I just write my own songs. He said, play me one. And he said some things about my voice that even I didn't understand. He said, you've got something of your own. I hear your influences, but you do have something of your own in there. And you should just keep writing these songs. And wow. He started to help me record them. And that was when I was 17. That was the first time that I'd ever experienced being in a studio or thought, oh, wow, the door suddenly opened.
Yeah. And when you got your first deal at 23, is that right?
I was actually 20 when I got my first deal. 2021, I think. It was to EMI. Yeah. It was, I'd been a backing singer for Gary Barlow, who was in that band.
Oh my gosh. Can I say something really quick?
Yes.
I need to.
You can say many things.
Thank you.
Yes.
up to 6, but no more. So here's one of my 6. I got lost in a Take That Gary Barlow YouTube cyclone about 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't get out. It was like I literally looked up at the clock and I realized that for about an hour I had gotten into this Take That. Because to me, listen, I will fight anybody on this. One of my favorite songs of all time is "Won't You" or
Back for Good.
Back for Good.
Amazing
that song is, and it sort of blew my mind because Gary wrote that by himself. I think he produced it. I mean,
yeah.
And those anomalies, which we talk a lot about on this podcast, but I am super fascinated by those moments where it's like you see something that looks like one thing, and then you do a little digging and realize, like, oh no, that guy's actually. Yeah. Like he's not just a pretty face. Like this guy's got real talent.
He really has. And he has a fascinating story. I mean, talk about someone who's carved out a career for their pretty much entire life. Yeah. He was in this boy band, which I really can't remember how he became part of Take That or how that came about, whether it was, a band being put together. It was a big, pop machine that they were the part of.
Because they were massive, right? Massive. I mean, they had, that was a hit in the States, but it wasn't a band you thought of. But the rest of the world, they were huge in Europe, huge probably in Japan and, all of Asia and everything. And they were a huge band. They had a lot of hits. And then I think they disbanded and Gary went on a solo career, and I met him by total chance. I was sitting in the car with a keyboard player friend of mine, and this guy comes running out to the car saying, "Hey, can you sing and dance?" I was like, I don't know about the dancing part, but yeah. I was like, yeah, just my job is just say yes to things. And he was like, can you come inside and fill in for somebody? I walk in this enormous rehearsal room. Well, hold on, back up. Why had you just practiced there?
I was just with my friend and a keyboard player. He was playing in the back. Sorry, I missed that part. So the keyboard player was playing with Gary. He was part of the band, and it was called Richard. And I was with him in the car, and this guy comes running out, and he asked me to fill in. I walk into this huge rehearsal room. There's this huge band, huge production set up, and then Gary Barlow walks in.
Are you? Sorry, I'm going to ask a lot of questions. Are you starstruck?
Oh, completely, because this guy is so famous.
Yeah, right.
And I hadn't had any experience in the music industry. I'd been recording in a studio my own songs. I hadn't met anybody. And that's the thing about Nashville that's so different that we might take for granted here, is that I didn't know any other artists coming up. Even after I met Gary and spent time with him, I didn't know anybody that could show me what this world is, of music. So
were you living in London at the time?
I was living in Surrey. Yeah, I was living in London, and I was going to college with my friend Annie. And
you're still in college. Okay.
It's just college. Yeah, I actually no. So I must have left by then. I was 19, I think, when I met Gary. Okay. And so I toured, I did that day in the rehearsal room, and he asked me to stay. And
which I got to think, if I'm great, and this random girl walks in and she starts singing, you're like, I have just hit the mother lode. How did we find this girl in an alley in London that sings like this?
I mean, I don't think he really, there was 2 of us girls. I don't think he was really necessarily knew much about me at first, but the more time we spent together, we traveled everywhere. We went all over Europe. It was part of his solo career. We were doing TV show. I was thrown into this world that I was kind of giggling to myself, going, nobody knows that I am winging this. Like, I've got no experience. I can't do any of these movements.
Did you know the songs?
Yes, I knew. Well, I had to learn them. So, but they were his new solo project. And it was something very different musically to what I was doing, but I was having so much fun. And then he one day was sitting on a plane. He said, "Do you write songs?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Will you play me one?" And so I handed him my iPod. Yes.
Were these the songs you recorded in that backyard?
Yeah, it was in the studio. Wow. So the timing of it was pretty magic because all this stuff was colliding. And I played it to him. It was a sort of a gospel song that I'd written. And he was saying to me, there's really something here. He introduced me to his manager at the time, and I ended up signing on to her.
Oh,
she
wow.
walked into EMI saying, here we are. This is a ballad. She's playing the piano and writing this song. And they signed me the next day. And this is stuff you hear in movies. I mean, you think this doesn't happen, and it did. But the hard part was that deal was my first ever record deal, and that kind of was a very, very spirally story. It was,
and for those who are listening, this is what's crazy, and these are the stories you love, because this really happens. Like, you'll have a powerhouse artist who has a lot of clout.
Yes,
people respect him or her, and they can really take someone into a record label, and go, "Hey, my record label, I like this person. You should sign him." And I mean, there's a lot of those stories where people, it's crazy to think about, but that really is how things happen sometimes.
Sometimes it does. I mean, he advocated for me. I think we had a huge full circle moment, because fast forward to years later, when I'd been signed to EMI, got dropped from EMI, that deal was a bit of a disaster. I was 22 years old at that time, thinking my career could be over at 22. When you've had such little experience, it's kind of devastating, because you think, well, you only get one record deal in your life, right? I didn't know any better than that. And then, I was singing in this little jazz club called the Kashmir Club in London, playing the piano.
Oh, I love that. I didn't know this.
It was like Tony Moore, and he was, he was such a cheerleader for artists that were unknown, trying to showcase them. It was the first time I'd seen this club where I could just go play piano. It didn't matter that no one knew me. Everybody was celebrated in that room. And, this, young A&R guy from Universal Music walked in, and I think it was 6 months before I agreed to go and meet with his boss, because I was like, there is no way I'm going near a record label again. I was terrified.
You just gotten burnt.
I'd gotten burned so bad. And I went to meet with his boss the day that the head of the label was listening to a song of mine. It was probably Lucie and Grange at the time. He was listening to a song of mine. Gary Barlow, this is years after I'd been his backing singer. He was writing lots of hit songs for other artists. He had his whole setup going before even Take That got back together again. He walks into the office, and I was told this story, and he said, "That's Lucie singing." And the guy said, "Oh yeah, this is, there's kind of a couple of artists on this label that we're trying to figure out, what to do with." I'm probably misquoting these things, but Gary said, "Yeah, this is Lucie. and praised me to him." And I was in the guy's office like maybe a week later.
It's in that same guy, two different labels.
Two different labels, and I signed to Universal, and that's when my kind of career began with my first record. But it was a crazy set of events, and that's why in this business that you've always got to have faith in what you love to do and keep doing it, because the only way you stop is if you quit, because these things are timing. Even when people hear songs, it's just the time it lands on their lap. You've never
and I think too, it speaks to, and I mean, Lucie, you and John, your husband, are like shining stars for this in our community in Nashville. But it also speaks to, again, here's this word again, but benevolence. This idea that like we're a community, and there's so much talent that isn't known, not because they're not talented, just because they're out there on the edges, and they're young and they're new and nobody knows about them. And so, so much of my career, and I love hearing this part of your story, but so much of my career was built on these sort of like people that had success going, "Hey, you guys need to check this guy out." And I think it's so cool when you see a guy like Gary, who's had so much success, that's vetting for you and pushing for you. And that's a huge thing. And that's a very valuable commodity in our industry. And you see that a lot, where people champion artists and really go, "Hey, you guys need to check this guy out. You need to check this girl out, this band, whatever." So
that's what you do. That's the amazing thing about you. You've always been that artist that is like, please look at my friends, look at what I love to surround myself with. You're one of those artists, which is huge in this town. So, I hope you know that about yourself.
Well, you know what it is though? I think when it's affected you so much, it's just hard not to be the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? It's such a big part of my story that it's just a natural response, because I was so deeply affected by people's kindness. I'm like, why would I not, keep that going? So a couple more questions, and we're going to get into the hot takes. So rewind. because I asked James Bay about this too, because I'm not from there. I'm sort of obsessed with England and especially London. But so it sounds like, did you have a season in your career? It sounds like this with the club you're just talking about, but because Gary had met you so early, did you have a season where you were like out gigging a bunch before the record stuff?
Before the record stuff. See, this is the strange thing, and this is the part that is very interesting in an artist's journey, is that after I did all this, you're young, you sign a record deal, you get dropped. Then you go back to basics of performing in small clubs, some places that, really have you grow as a performer, as a musician, as a songwriter. And then I got signed to a record label, and then it's like, boom, you're put on these tours. Like I got to open for Jamie Cullum and Macy Gray at the time. We're going way back. And a British artist called Will Young. And I was doing these shows, and then all of a sudden, even just as my record came out, I'm performing at Shepherd's Bush Empire by myself.
Jeez.
And that is incredible. And it was incredible at the time, and I would never change it. But I didn't have enough experience, touring around like I've had in America now. I came to America and started again. I now know what it's like to really try and grow who your audience is, because if you're suddenly put on a platform that gives you a bigger audience, it's almost like you haven't really worked for that audience. You haven't started from the bottom. They haven't grown with you. They suddenly appear, and I never really understood why. It's not that I didn't enjoy the music I made. It's just that it didn't make sense to me. And looking back, I understand why it didn't.
And I think sometimes what's scary about that is that as easy as they come is as easy as they'll go, fan-wise. And when you don't have a chance to really build a groundswell of people who are like, every time you come to this city, we're coming because we love Lucie Silvas.
Absolutely. You can only do that in an authentic way. And it's like, it like you said, it can, if you go up quick, you can go down quick. And it's something you want a steady, long career for your entire life, so you can make the music you love. That's what I've always wanted.
So then fast forward, and then we'll jump in. You moved to America. I mean, that's a big move. I mean, and I think too that, and especially to your story, and I think this is really important. You had success in England. I mean, like you'd played a lot of shows, and people know who you were, and you decide to transplant your career across the pond, as you will, to a whole other country that wasn't familiar with you yet. I mean, that's a big move. And what I love about that is now knowing a little bit more about your story, there's a little bit of a pedigree there. So, I mean, I would imagine built into you is this sort of like, well, I've moved a bunch. This isn't where a lot of people might see that as like, but you've got a little, you're sort of tempered for it, probably more than most.
Sure.
But that's a big deal. What tell me how you got there. What sort of...
It was gradual. I mean, it wasn't like I packed up one day and just went, now I live in Nashville. Also, there's such a process behind all of it, to move countries. But on a sort of personal level, it took me a couple of, I'd kept coming back and forth. I visited, firstly with John Green, who you mentioned earlier, my best friend since we were 14 years old. He was coming to Nashville, was in love with it. It was a very different Nashville, obviously, in 2007. But I was blown away by it. I think I craved the simplicity. I'd been in this sort of pop machine in England, and I'd had some incredible experiences. And when I look back now, I'm like, wow, can't believe I got to do that and got to tour and release records and do all these things. But I was at a tough time in my life personally. So when I came to Nashville for the first time, saw all these singer-songwriters, the immense pool of talent and such kindness and such openness, and like, come in and have a look at what we've got here, and open arms. And I was blown away by it. And it felt simpler to me. And it was just, I didn't have any expectations from it. I didn't have any goals or plans. I just was in love with it. And I kept coming back. I even came back for a stint of 9 months where I lived with my friend Cree Harrison. We got an apartment together. And it took me a while to move to Nashville and make up my mind I was going to be here. I met John in that time, my husband, and it was very difficult for us because I was like, well, how are we going to have a relationship if I'm not if we're not in the same country. And so part of it was really that I wanted to give that a real shot. I wanted us to have a chance to be together. And I really had no clue. I'm not a country artist. I love country music. What I'm learning about it, I grew up with like old traditional country, but this industry is very different in everything that it encompasses. And so I was not sure what I could bring to the table. I'm like, you guys don't need me. You've got the most amazing songwriters in the world. And I was encouraged so much by the people around me to just bring what I had to the table that was of my own and listen and learn and just create something new for myself. And it was a big move. It is still a big move because sometimes I feel very, very British, and I'm like, I feel sometimes out of place. And then I realize how far away my family are, even though they're all in New Zealand. And some things about you just grew up. It's your temperament. It's the way you think. It's the way you speak. It's the way you look at things is very different. And I would never live back in England. I can't see myself doing that, even though I love it and I miss it in so many ways. I feel quite in bed. I'm very embedded in American culture now and in my American life. You know what I mean? And my family, my Osborne family are here. So it's a scary thing, but I'm proud of doing it. But honestly, in this town, I see artists move here. They're so young. They have so much courage. I had a lot of support very early on from people like Cree and John and TJ and those people. And I often have to push myself to try and be more courageous because I don't want to feel like I'm in a safety net because I have my family here now. I still want to be an individual and still make my own decisions and make my own path.
Well, I think you're doing that very well. And I'm thrilled. I mean, I'm so glad that you live here.
Thank you.
What you bring to this, not just your talent, but again, you guys are just the greatest.
Well, thank you. And also it started the whole episode of me stalking you as an artist. That was another, we don't have to go down that branch, but let's be real here.
Oh my
Anyone
God.
who's listening knows that I've always been a massive Dave fan. And, King Billy, the band that John used to be in, used to blare your music. And that's how I first heard you, from them and Charlie Warsham. And it is just, I was like, who is this guy? And the first time I met you, I was completely trying to hold it together.
Underwhelmed. Completely underwhelmed.
No.
There's no way that's the same guy.
No.
So okay. So let's do this. Let's get into the 5 hot takes. You ready?
Okay. Yes.
All right. What's your first hot take? Let's hear it.
Hot take 1.
Okay. So key changes in a song.
Oh!
I know you love a key change. This is the mother of all key changes, Chain Reaction by Diana Ross, written by the Bee Gees. There's 8 key changes.
No way.
And it's like you listen to it nowadays, the most recent song like Beyonce, Love on Top, you hear those key changes. But
it keeps going
this is the motherload of key changes, and it keeps going up, and you hear the Bee Gees are on backing vocals on this song. And it's like, I just remember the video for that song with Diana Ross. She was in this kind of mermaid shaped tight dress, and her hair's like this beautiful flowing, curls, massive hair. And she's, it keeps changing key and it keeps going up, and it's like, and Barry Gibb's voice is going into the stratosphere. You're like, can he sing a higher note? We already know he can sing high. And it's just the most amazing. I still think it's one of the greatest pop songs ever written.
And you bring up a great point, because I think for those who don't know that song, you probably do know Love on Top, and that's exactly what Beyonce does.
Yeah,
at the end of that song, to your point.
Yeah.
It keeps changing keys, keeps changing. And again, 8 key changes.
8.
That is, you have almost started over.
Exactly. And it's not like, it's like keeps, the modulations keep going. It's not like crazy key changes like we have, and, like the Beach Boys, you have, Wouldn't It Be Nice? It starts in a certain key and then changes for the first verse and never goes back to the original key that it started in. It's like, well, that's a real crazy twisty fries key change.
Isn't that, I've talked about it on, Stevie Wonder does that on My Sharia Moore.
Oh my God, my favorite.
And he comes back. He does come
song.
back, but literally in the first, My Sharia Moore, pretty as a summer day.
It's amazing. Actually, that's a great one because that is truly, when I hear that song, something triggers me from childhood because I love it so much.
Yeah.
I think when I went to see him live, I cried throughout that song.
Oh my gosh.
It is so, and those are the clever things where they make it sound so seamless.
That's right.
And
so will you speak? Because Kevin, so I had Kevin Griffin on KG, Crazy KG, and this was one of his hot takes was key changes, and he just said like, what happened to the key change? So can you speak to why do you think that's kind of becoming, and it's not gone away. They're going to people listen to this, they're going to be furious. Like, you just don't listen to right music. But I think globally on a pop sense, because I know there's amazing key changes in sort of like other genres and, but top 40 key changes, it's pretty rare. Like, why do you think that is?
I think that people are afraid of thinking that it will complicate a song. People are all about, especially in pop music, I feel like, let's keep it simple, whether it's a rap or R&B or a pop, like you say, top 40, it's keep it simple. It's all about the rhythm and the melodies and, that lyric that pops out. They're not really interested in, and then you do get those bands like Half Alive, or you get, and your music as well. And it's like, there are some really interesting changes musically. But I think, you even hear on Billie Eilish's album, there's some crazy chords going on in there.
Oh yeah.
Notes. And it's really exciting to hear that because it's innovative and it's inventive. And I think that's when an artist really stands out, when you see all the key components in there, but you don't realize it because it's presented in such a malleable, a simple way.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think people just want, and sometimes in something that, record labels want it to be simple. They want it to be an easy sell, and that sometimes can take away from the integrity of the music, not always, but sometimes.
And I think too, and I wonder if you'll agree with this. I think, and we talked about this a little bit on the other one with Kevin, but I think too, it's like what you listen to so informs what you create.
Yeah.
And I think as that little window gets smaller and smaller, then what's informing the younger singer-songwriters or they're not hearing key changes, they don't write key changes.
Right.
And I think what was happening in the 60s, 70s, it was just so musical and every, all 12 notes could be used.
Yeah.
That's one of the craziest things too. I need to do a hot take on this, but in Paul Simon's Still Crazy After All These Years, every key is represented.
Yeah. Oh my.
Because the bridge covers so many. And so, it's crazy, or it's something like that. It's really the amount of keys he has in that one song is nuts. But anyway, I think there is something about what if we're not hearing key changes, you're not going to write them. And so I think sadly it just keeps that natural effect of getting smaller and smaller because it's like a little tight circle on itself kind of thing.
Exactly. But you know what? It's really, it's not, I think things should be authentic and natural to you. They should feel good and feel right to do. Because some of my favorite songs in the world are 2 chords. And
That's right.
They, are very simple, and it's all about that melody and that way it makes you feel. It's the mood. I have a couple of weird key changes in a couple of my songs that.
Well, Girls from California
was a prime example. It's like, how do you get back to the verse again after that?
Don't you love that moment in a writing session? You're like,
whoa, when did we go?
We were there.
Okay, how did we get here? We're up.
There's a lot of silence and staring at the keyboard and guitar. With
total silence. And when somebody has that it wasn't me that figured that out musically. And it was like, I was just like singing a melody going, can you just make that happen underneath? Like, can you just make it so?
Here's the genius. This is your genius though, Lucie, and this is what shines through, is that your brain, and this is the thing about key changes and melodies like that, is you have to have the equipment in your brain that wants to hear a melody that needs the key, that the key change is a part of. And so I think it just speaks to your, the library of stuff you have in your brain. So it makes me want to ask you this question too, like, because not only are you such a prolific artist and so good in your own right, but you do so much co-writing. You write, you've had songs cut by Reba, by Miranda Lambert, a billion other people. What does that look like difference wise between what you write for yourself and what you write with other people? Like, how is there a different approach?
I don't know, because I feel like there's been a rare occasion with someone like Miranda. We were in the room with me, Miranda, and Natalie Hemby writing Smoking Jacket. And we wrote a few things, but we knew that Miranda was looking to write new songs for her record. And she can write by herself. She doesn't really need anybody, but her and Hemby write a lot. And I was really lucky to get to write for the three of us. That was a very different scenario, because I think actually what Hemby is so good at as well is stepping back. She has so much of her own artistry, but she steps back and allows whatever is in the room to appear instead of pushing it. But she still has such a distinctive style that you can hear. When I'm writing with another artist, I try to do my best to say, it's more a personal thing. What is it on your mind? How can I help you? How can I encourage that, what you're feeling? A lot of people like Trisha Yearwood, or people that have cut my songs, have cut them because I just wrote them. I think they maybe heard, Trisha had told me that there was something in them that she just liked. She just liked the running theme in all of them. And those were personal moments where I just wrote something that was personal to me. The great thing that I find, and I know that you would understand this and agree with this and feel this, I would expect, but when you're writing purely for yourself, it doesn't have to be anything. And there is so much freedom in that. It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have to make sense to any. And often, especially in country music, there is it's so prolifically written, but sometimes I want to go off that grid. You know what I mean? It's chronologically brilliant. Everything makes perfect sense,
it's all there.
And my head does not make sense, and my head is not logical, and my head is not rational all the time. And when that comes out in a song, I actually celebrate it more than anything.
I love it.
Because I know it's me coming out in that song. I know it doesn't, it's not perfectly put together.
Well, I think that's what, to your point about with Trisha, I call her Trish, sweet Trish, but ST. But, that's what she hears, because she's so used to really well-written, mildly formulaic songs that are incredible. They're incredible.
Yeah, incredibly well-written, yeah.
But then she hears something that's so heartfelt and unique.
Right.
And I think that's something in Nashville to get celebrated too.
Oh,
okay, so tell me about Hot Take 2, Lucie. I can't believe key changes, by the way.
I know, that is bonkers.
Hot Take 2.
Okay, so the second one is one chord. This is the opposite to any of that. Chain of Fools.
Oh, look at you with the theme.
Chain of Fools is one chord, isn't it? Aretha Franklin.
I mean, basically, it's a
if you think about it, it's one chord. You're not really.
Yeah, you're kind of right, because what's changing is sort of the bass line.
The bass line. So I guess maybe that does change chord, but it doesn't really.
And what you could very fairly say is that you don't have to change. You could just vamp.
You could vamp, and her voice is so dynamic, and she's going right up there, and and yet the lyric is so punchy and so memorable that that's all it needs. And it's like, and even if it's two chords, like even if it's arguably two chords, it's like that keeps you interested, and it's one of the staples of our generations. And it's like, how can that? And we sit there trying to think of what clever thing can I do on the piano, like we were talking about with key changes. How can I be something different? And then this song comes along like a punch in the face, like, hey, we can do it like this, and we don't need to do anything. And it's so clever, and it's like the simplicity of it blows me away. And it's that's what kind of blows my mind.
Watch what I do here. Watch what I do here, Luce. Follow me. So we talk about Aretha, one of the greatest singers of all time.
Yes.
Tell me about what it's like singing like you do, because again, I say this every time we talk, and I'll say this throughout the rest of this podcast, but you being the singer you are, how does that affect how you approach songwriting? Like, because you've got such a dynamic instrument, where I think a lot of us who can't sing quite like you can, we're dealing with 6 colors in our little Crayola box. You've got 120. And so is that something that can limit you? Does it free you? Does it make it better? I'm sure all of those things, but can you just kind of speak to what it's like being able to sing like you can, and then also trying to write around that? Not much, which maybe section, which is terrible to ask two questions at once. But my other question would be, it's got to be a nightmare for co-writing with you with artists, because I can't imagine what someone sitting in the room starts hearing you singing. And
do you know what? I don't so appreciate that. I mean, I don't feel that way about my own voice, but I appreciate that so much. I think, do you know what? I think if you grow up as a singer predominantly, which I did, songwriting came later than singing, even though I was writing songs since I was like 10 years old. Terrible songs, but I was singing first. So I wanted to be a singer. That's what I wanted.
Yeah.
And so that can be to your detriment. Well, number one, I think the way songwriters do so well, that their main thing isn't that they want to be a singer. I went really croaky when I said that.
That was exciting.
Main thing. Like Lucie Silvas in the building. Hello. Shocking.
Brucey Silvas just killed me.
I mean, I got that nickname for me and Natalie Hemby are two croaky, deep voices. But no, it can be, songwriters do so well because they're not relying on their voice. They're relying on the strongest melody possible. And if you can't sing and you're tone deaf and you sing a melody and the other person's like, wow, you must have hit a home run on that if it's coming across. So I think you have to be careful not to fall back on that. One really interesting thing when it comes to my own songwriting that happened is that I, somewhere in my career, got nodules in my voice, and I'd been over singing, maybe partying too much, staying up too late, talking too much. And I got a real problem with my voice somewhere within the past 15 years. And it kind of changed my range a little bit. I've still got a decent range, but it was bigger before, and it changed my voice. It changed the way I sing. I used to just belt out without any real, thought for the consequences and who was listening. And then it changed, and it made me write songs differently. I couldn't rely on just singing what I thought would be impressive notes, because, and it really did make me want to sing more emotionally than technically. And when you rely on the emotion of something, it's all about the emotion of the song. You can sing a million things, and people that, like Carole King was a prime example. She wasn't necessarily Aretha Franklin. She used to convey such amazing emotion. She had such a unique tone in her voice. But somebody that writes songs for someone like Aretha Franklin and then sings her own music, it was simple. It wasn't like a wham bam show-stopping voice. It was just a beautiful tone singing great songs. And that's what I've wanted to be in my latter part of my career. Was I wanted to learn to be a great songwriter. I wanted it to all be about the song, and then the bonus be a voice that conveys it in the best way possible. And, that's more important to me. And technically, there are singers out there that can sing circles around anything I could dream of doing. And all I want is to just convey a song in the most real, simple, emotional way possible. That's all.
Which is amazing, because this is a weird thing to say out loud, but I feel like so many times people that can sing as well as you can sing, believe it or not, don't actually communicate that well, because you can lean back on this, this ammunition that you have to create such an amazing vocal moment. Right. And you forget that really anybody from Tom Waits to Joni Mitchell, to you, to Aretha, to whoever the type of voice is, all you're really trying to do is communicate.
Like Cyndi Lauper, Joni Mitchell, all these people that had such unique qualities in their voices, and you can't imagine anybody else singing those songs.
That's right.
Then there's voices I'm impressed by. I go, wow, I'm so impressed. It's like an athlete. It's like, wow, how did they pole vault like that? How did they have the strength and lung power and everything to do that? And then there's somebody that can't do any of that, where it just hits me in the heart, and I don't even know. That's something you can't even learn. You cannot train to be emotionally that good. It's just natural. It's just from within. So
yeah. All right, hot take 3. Give it to me.
Hot take 3.
Okay, shoot. Hang on, lost my train of thoughts here. Okay, so Jack White, "Take Me With You When You Go." This is a really strange one. It's like I'm listening one day and I'm like, think I know where I'm at. you know, and then 2 minutes in, there's the craziest tempo change. It's like he recorded 2 songs in the studio and just decided to put them together.
Yeah.
It's a bonkers. And I was kind of like, I love the why of things. It's like, why? Why did he do it? And he's like, why not? I don't care.
Exactly
I don't play by your rules. And that's what I love about it. He is another prime example of an artist who has his own set of rules. He's in his own playground. He's doing exactly what he wants. And I really, really, really admire that. And it's crazy. It feels like, wait, was he just like drinking a beer and then it got 10 beers in and then off to the race? Here we go. Whoa, hold on. Hold on tight. Here we go. And it's really cool.
One of the dangers for me when I started, you know, I kind of call it in quotes, you know, professional songwriting, when, you know, 5 or 6 years ago when I started really, like, you know, I signed my co-pub deal in Nashville, and that now, you know, that's been a part of my career too, is writing songs for other people. Mm-hmm. One of the hardest disciplines that I have is to remember there aren't rules, because it's so hard to sit in a room with other professionals, and it's not as hard by myself. And I think you're probably the same. Yeah. When you're writing for yourself, you're like, let's chuck everything out the window and just have some fun and see what happens.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard for me to remember that there aren't rules. And those kind of songs, you know, I laughed about this with Lionel Richie's "Say You, Say Me," the bridge.
Right.
You know, see you on.
Exactly.
You're like, what the heck?
Absolutely. It's like it just suddenly they just decided again that, you know, Fleetwood Mac Chain. It's like all of a sudden this is a whole ending. Yes. It's like,
yeah, here we go.
Wow. Okay. What? You know, I just wish I'd been there. I want to be there in that moment in the studio for these moments where they decide. And you know, it's part of that fun creative process. Why it was the why not moment.
That's exactly right.
You know,
I think you're just following your intuition and your heart. There's no brain.
Absolutely.
It is like, you know, I got this lick and we could just shove it into the back of this song. Or what if we just, I like what you were just playing. Let's just make that be the back half of the song. You know, There's no like, well, you know, we can't really. And that is, to me, one of the hardest things about what we do in making music is this really fine line you walk of wanting to do something that's digestible, that people understand. So you don't want to not leave them breadcrumbs to where you're going.
Right.
You know what I mean? You always want people to kind of, okay. Oh, I see that. Okay. But you also want to go with what you just feel.
Absolutely.
Like you just feel it. You're like, I don't know why we're going to speed up 20 BPM, but God, doesn't it feel good?
Exactly.
You know, and I have to really watch that thing in me that's like, no, hold on.
Hold on.
We can't do that.
Pull it back. No, you can't. And I think that's the art of being an artist and a songwriter for other people. We've talked about that, you and me, when we've hung out before, is there is an art to it, because you figure out very quickly in the room when there's room for that and when there isn't.
That's right.
And it's okay because there's a beautiful simplicity to just going with the flow. As something presents itself. And I think the hardest part about any of this is when things don't present themselves and you're clutching at things and you're like, where is it? Because you know, when there's a song in the air and it just takes you with it. And days where it doesn't, that's when the questions come and you start asking what something should be. And that's the hardest thing, whether you are writing for yourself or with someone else. But there is a freedom to it. I never want to do something the gratuitous. I always want it to be natural. And I think that's what I admired so much about people like the Beach Boys and Queen. You know, they just had this way of doing things. It's like, how did you do something quite complicated that sounded so simple that millions and millions of people don't even know is happening? You know,
that's right.
They don't even know it's happening. Key. Yeah, it's amazing.
Do you feel like, you know, so for those who are listening, you're married to John Osborne of the Brothers Osborne, one of the best country groups in the world. And I just want to brag on John for a second. I would argue in my top 3 to 5 favorite guitar players in Nashville. I am obsessed with his guitar playing. But here's a fun fact about John: incredible songwriter and an incredible singer, and apparently an incredible artist, painter, which I don't even want to talk about how frustrating that is. Like that painted, whatever. He'll post that picture on Instagram.
This is a new thing I've seen too. I've been married to him for years.
That's so frustrating.
I know. I'm like, you're so annoying. Like,
that is so annoying.
Stay out of the kitchen. That's my bed.
Leave something for the rest of us. That's right. But John is this incredibly talented guy. You guys have been married now for 5 years?
We've been married for 5. Yeah. We didn't know that. Thank you.
Yeah, write that down. But you know, as we speak about being brave and musical journeys, and to our point about the Jack White, do you feel like that, like being married to a guy who is such an incredible musician in his own right? He's so good, he's so musical. What is that dynamic? I laugh to myself sometimes because I feel like, you guys are like the next generation, Amy and Vince, where it's like, I just imagine y'all sit in your house and sing songs together. And he just is like, play me a concert tonight, Luce. I'd love to hear you. Or you're like, John, just play guitar. What is that dynamic like? And do you think it informs how you make your own music separate from him?
Oh, it does. Yeah. I mean, we have fun together in that way. Like he is so many things, like any artist is. He's part of Brothers Osborne. He's also a guitar player that loves to play blues. He's also a songwriter that likes to write country music, but he's also a songwriter that just likes to write songs, no matter what they are. And I've written, we've had a couple of songs together, not many, but actually for this new record I'm writing, we've written a few together.
Oh, I'm glad.
And it's really like, it's fun because we do sit there and jam. And actually that's what kind of brought us together. I remember, it was something my mum used to sing Summertime all the time to me when I was a kid. Used to sing it to me to get me to sleep. And one time back in...
You're talking about DJ Jazzy Jeff.
Exactly that. Yes. My mum. Oh my God. The visual of my mum doing that is truly brilliant to me. I think, we sat there, and it was back when we lived in Midtown, or I was visiting and living with him part-time back in 2009. And he sat there and we sang and played. We still got a recording of me and him singing Summertime and him playing. And it really connected us because he grew up listening to blues, and so did I. And he loved blues players. I loved blues singers. And I think we are on the same wavelength with so many things. I wish I was on a wavelength with the way he plays guitar. I mean, it is truly astounding. And I hate saying that as his wife. It feels I get embarrassed about it, but I do get blown away by watching him. And there is some things where I know he's thinking about it, but then something comes over him on stage where I almost see the kid. I see the kid that was 15, just with a total dream of playing guitar. And it fills me with so much joy because I know that the music business is a navigation for everybody, and it is for John, and it is for every artist. But when he gets to just play, and I know that his joy with playing with other artists, and he's played with a lot of other artists, when he plays with me, it feels like he's back to the freedom of just doing whatever. There are no set rules. And I think that Brothers Osborne has done an amazing job of bringing as much of that as humanly possible into their own music. They've done things that I've not seen anybody else do, which is whether it's in their videos or whether it's in their musical arrangements. They've done cool things that are not typical of country music. And I really love that about them, and they're sort of sticking to their guns. And I think that John and I definitely love to have fun experimenting, and he's influenced me a lot. But he also says that he has seen a different way of songwriting, because I grew up with a different way, which was very melody driven more than it was lyric driven. So it's kind of that as combined, and we've learned from each other in that way.
Well, you said something really profound. I mean, I wrote this down. I just think this is incredible. Like then you said, and then other times I see the kid when he's playing. And I think as a creative, that is such a hard discipline when you're a professional and you've been doing something for decades.
Yeah.
Because you're just trying to get back. There's a wonderful podcast. And if you're listening to this, you can stop this podcast to go listen to this one. But Andre 3000 is on Broken Record, and it's one of the most vulnerable. He and Rick Rubin talk about artistry and success. And it is one of the most profound, vulnerable podcasts that I've ever heard. A conversation where Andre is just saying, all we're trying to do as artists is get back to the kid in his room in high school making music.
Absolutely.
Where nobody cared, nobody heard it. And and I think when you say I see the kid, that's a reminder to me. Like I want to get that tattooed on my arm. So give me number 4. What do we got?
Hot take 4.
Okay. We have got REM, Losing My Religion. There's no chorus.
I thought you were going to say that when you said that.
Really?
Yes.
So it's just, and listen, this isn't like, oh wow, it was a revolution. It's just In pop music, it is something, when something's so big like that, it's just a stream of great melodies and lyrics, and there's the structure, it just keeps going, like loads of verses and tags, and the Losing My Religion tag. And I just, that song is just so it's so catchy. It's like, it's one of that era of music where it's had that cult following of REM and the Cranberries and all those kind of thing. It's just, I just remember in a world where we're taught that, you have to have structure in a song. It has to be like, no, this is not, we have a verse and we have a pre and we have a chorus and we have another verse and pre. It's just nice when it's such a simple, small detail, really. But it's all of a sudden, when I heard that song, it affected the way I looked at songwriting, because I grew up listening to very traditional songwriting as a kid. And then I heard that, I was like, well, maybe we don't need a chorus. And it's like, or maybe
crazy.
the whole
So you noticed
chorus.
that?
Yeah.
Did you, that's amazing. You had the wherewithal to notice that at that time.
Well, because, I was trying to learn. I was trying to think, because you go into a room day in and day out. I started co-writing really, really young. I was like 17, 18 when I started meeting people and being put in a room by my publisher at the time. I've been writing songs on my own till that point, which was great. But then I don't know how I fell into co-writing so easily. I found it really exciting to meet songwriters. It was more about meeting them and all their discographies and all these places they'd been and these adventures they'd had. And I was just excited to be in that room. But I remember then going in with my friend Howard New. He was one of my early co-writers. Unfortunately, he passed away, and I miss him still so much, because he was one of the first people that allowed me to be me. Didn't care what was going on in the charts, didn't care what the record label was saying, was just like, what do you want to write about? And what do you want to be? And so few people do that. They're like, we want a hit. I want to be in the hit parade. I want, I don't want to be an album track. You know what I mean? It's like, he just wanted to convey what I mean. And we wrote a song called Forget Me Not, and it didn't have a chorus. It just had verses and a bridge somewhere in there. And that was highly influenced by, songs like Losing My Religion, whereas suddenly I just thought, well, no, I'm just going to write it how it should be. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be anything. And I think that's just a little detail that might be unnoticeable to some people, or it feels like that song's just all chorus. It's just every chorus. Songs should just be whatever they should be. It doesn't matter. And that's how you create something new. And that was new. That song was unique at the time.
Yeah. I talk about this a lot on this podcast, but the archetype of that to me is Last Goodbye by Jeff Buckley. He never sings the same melody twice.
Absolutely.
If you listen to it, it'll blow your mind.
It's Isn't that
crazy?
It is crazy. And he was what a special one of a kind. And such a tragic story. And yet it's like he listened to the way he sang, and it was like he influenced so many people. You listen to Radiohead and you hear the influence of that kind of almost classical rock operatic. There's so much emotion in that voice. And it was, how can someone be around like Jimi Hendrix for such a short time and have such a generational profound influence? Yeah.
So hard left-hand turn here. One of my favorite Lucie Silvas fun facts, is your connection to Jamiroquai, who I
yes.
Will you please talk about Jamiroquai, who I love? I just remember we were somewhere, you and I, and you just flew past that. You're like, oh, that's when I was doing those shows. So I was singing with Jamiroquai, and I was like, okay.
That sounds like I totally did that on purpose. Like,
hard stop. Please tell me. Will you please talk about this? When was that?
What a crazy story. When I even confuses me when I think about all my different chapters musically. You could look back on it and go, oh my goodness, like, how are you still doing this? Like, this is like, I'm exhausted. But at the same time, it's like, then you look back at it in the positive way and you say, wow, this really had some musical turns and experiences. Right. And that came about a friend of mine, Charlie, who I'd written some and recorded some of my first album with. He was a producer. He started off as an engineer, then a producer, then you'd co-write. And he was working with JK, and Jay had
Who is Jamiroquai?
Who is Jamiroquai, the band.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, of course, he was huge in Europe and huge in Asia as well. And I didn't know what his positioning in America was. I know there's some people that hadn't even heard of him over here. But his music was such a throwback, funk. And the musicality of it is truly mind-blowing, as you know. And his voice is amazing. As an artist, he was and still is one of a kind. His videos for Virtual Insanity, and he is a complete one of a kind. And so he was working in the studio with Charlie. I had written a song. I was trying to figure out how to record a record. I was out of a record deal. I didn't have any backing or management or anything at that time. And Charlie had always been amazing at encouraging me to keep going and say, just make music, just write a song, just record it. It's not hard. It's not rocket science. Just do it. He always had this sort of like just very laid back, why is it that hard type attitude. And I really, really appreciated that. I need that around me. I used to get into this woe is me catastrophizing. It's over. I'm never going to do this. And he'd start laughing. And Charlie would be like, you're an idiot. And he'd just like start laughing.
We need those people.
We do, because he'd laugh at me and I'd be annoyed that he was laughing at my emotions. And then he'd be like, all right, great, get on with it. Let's go in the studio.
So English, by the way.
So English, just like not jumping on that sort of drama. And I really appreciated that. I wrote a song called Happy with Judy Zook and Graham Kearns, one of my favorite songs from my album, Letters to Ghosts. So Happy was an earlier song than Letters to Ghosts, than that album. But such a fun song. Me and Charlie worked on it. We got a few of the players that had worked with JK. And because Charlie was working with JK in his studio in Hertfordshire, he has this amazing studio at his house, or one of his houses, just in Hertfordshire. And all these players that had played in the band or played on sessions for JK came in and played on Happy. But I got a phone call at 4 a.m. from Jay, who had heard Happy, and he was freaking out about it. And I was freaking out. I don't think I heard a word he said, because I was like, JK is calling me on my phone. He is very famous and very talented, and I don't know what's happening here. I was like lying in bed half asleep in my parents' house, which is a whole nother story. I was like back at home, with my suitcases, and calling me at 4 a.m. And then I remember my sister's baby Monty was in the other room, and she was fast asleep, and I was taking care of him for the night. So I had Monty in my arms as a baby, feeding him with JK on the phone, telling me how much he loved this song. He was going,
this sounds like a Mad Lib.
It was crazy. He was going on about the bass line, which was really cool, because actually this guy, Paul Turner, who's an amazing bass player, played drums on it, had Ash Sohn play drums, who has played with incredible amount of artists. He's unbelievable. Amazing. I was so honored to have him play on that song. And I was just lucky because these people were just around and they played on some girl's song, you know what I mean? And it's like, and Jay kept going on about it, and then he was like, you need to come into the studio and come and record some more songs. Yeah, come on, let's go, we can start tomorrow and all this stuff. And I'm like completely overwhelmed at this phone call. Went on for about an hour, and then I called Charlie the next day and I went, you'll never guess that he could. Did you give him my number? He was like, yeah. And I went, did he mean that? And he went, I'm not sure that he meant that you can really come to the studio, because he might not have meant that. And I was like, I don't care. I was just happy with the phone call. He loved one of my songs. I was blown away by it. But sure enough, he was like, come to my studio, record your songs there. And it turned into a production deal with Jay. And he paid for it all. I remember he was such an artist about it. He came in and wrote me a check, and it was for a lot of money. And he was like, go, do it. His accountants come in the next day. I'm like, I'll take that. Thank you. Just don't think so.
He's like, that's not a real checkbook. I give that to him, and he thinks there's money in there, but there's not.
And it's not like he was, they were the boss, but he was just being a crazy artist. He just loved something and wanted to do it. And they were like, hang on a second here. And, but I did record a lot of songs in his studio. And those are some of the recordings you hear on Letters to Ghosts, because Happy is an original recording. That's recorded amazing. At Jay's studio. And then, I got another phone call asking if I wanted to tour with him. And so we went around the UK and toured. And that was the most amazing experience. Of course, I was on stage, but really it wasn't about me at all. It was about watching him and watching him handle the amount of fame that he had, and also just an artist that was doing because again, the artists that you follow that stick around have their own thing and they don't veer away from it. And he didn't. He had a theme running through everything. He loved his kind of music and he just kept doing that. And the headdresses that he had, amazing costumes he had on stage. I just had a lot of respect for him, and I think that he was he's a crazy character. His personality is very all over the place. It's very sort of high energy, and yet I think he just really appreciated what I was doing and liked it, and that gave me a lot of confidence. But he also helped me, and when I wanted to put Happy on Letters to Ghost, it was complicated legally because it was part of that deal, part of an independent thing I was doing for Letters to Ghost, and lawyers were involved, and it got very complicated. And then I spoke to Jay, and he was like, "This is silly. It's like, that's your song. You have that song." That. He was so kind to me. And like you said earlier about artists being advocates for other artists, from Gary to JK to you to Brandy Carlisle, these are people, and Chris Stapleton, these are people who have
I fit in that hierarchy, by the way. That make perfect sense to be with those people.
You are one, and when I met you, I think that's what reminded me. It seems like you had that influence there as well. You love that kind of, throwback music, but JK, I can hear that in some of yours as well. And I loved it so much. And I think that's what other artists, they've given me a reason to keep going. So,
that to me, I think when I'll look back at my career someday when I'm old and gray, and living in a field by myself somewhere in Montana,
I'll join you. Something amazing.
Yeah, please. We'll start a cult. I think the things that I'm the most proud of are the moments where other artists rallied around what I did. I mean, I love doing what I do. I love that I've made a living of it. I love that I've been blessed to be able to do it. But the Ebenezers of my life, the moments in my life that I remember the clearest and I have the most pride, and I find myself reminiscing the most about, are when an artist that I respected saw me and said, "Hey, I like what you're doing. I want to help in whatever way I can." Right. And I think that's one of the reasons I love Nashville, is because it still happens. You bump into somebody that at the
and you bumped into Gap. Bonnie Raitt, right, in a coffee shop.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. That's
a story for another day.
But honestly, that is. But I think, when does that happen somewhere else than Nashville?
And I think with you, that's one of the things I love about your story is you have so much of that. And I think, to me, it's one of the things that validates what I do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think I can think about a lot of things that you think people come to shows, you think about money you make from CDs or whatever. But to me, I think the most validating thing for me is other artists. It's not fans. It's when it's somebody that I respect. And I think your career is ripe with that. I mean, there are just so many moments in your career where artists have stepped in and gone, "I will do whatever." And I mean, it's fun watching that. Even in Nashville, it's still happening. I mean, what happened with Brandy, last year, the year before, she had you come do the shows and she opened and you closed. I mean,
it was crazy.
It speaks to how gifted you are and how much people love what you do. Which I hope you can realize that and celebrate.
Thank you. I mean, it does mean a lot to me. And Brandy was amazing. I think I'd been a fan of her for so long, and for her to do that, kind of, it's a head scratcher. It's like, how is this happening? And John's such a huge fan too, so it was blowing his mind. And I think he was proud of that, which made me feel proud. And do you know what? There's two things about that. What you said was very poignant, because as an artist, we gravitate to other artists who are following their dreams, and not that someone like Brandy has never given up. She's so talented, but she's had highs and lows, and she's just kept at it. She didn't stop. She wasn't waiting for permission. And that's the biggest thing about an artist. Keeps going. You don't wait for permission to make music. You just make it. And as artists, we look for that in other artists, and they can keep us going, like you've had experiences of, and I have. When it comes to fans, I think that the fans that I've had understood something about me that I didn't even know was there. And that's why they signed on. And I think you can easily even forget that as an artist. You can forget because something changes in your life. Something changes and takes you on a different path. And the industry teaches us to look at what we haven't got and try and obtain it.
That's right.
And
that's right.
Then you forget, but wait a minute, my fans don't love me for what I haven't got. They love me for what I have got. And then you get a confusing message that contradicts that from the industry of going, no. You may have this radio station. We want the cool one. Or you've got the cool one. We want the mainstream one. And it's like, and you forget about what makes you completely. And those fans, the people, it's like having friends. Like, don't concentrate on the people that don't like you. Concentrate on the people that love you, even when you're being an idiot. So the fans that love your music love it for a reason. And we forget that. And I think that is just as important as looking to other artists.
Yeah, that's a good look at you preaching. So this is the big conclusion here, Luce. This is number 5. What do you got?
Hot take 5.
Okay, I've got, it's another, it's a really weird one. I don't know.
I celebrate
It's a
these.
lyric one. It's like, so I don't know if this is a hot take, but there's a band, do you know Prefab Sprout?
I know the name, and I've got some in my yard.
The weird... I said Russell Sprouts. Okay, that's a guy that I met once in the post office. Yes, another. There's so many chapters we could go down. Prefab Sprout is British band. I think they're British. They have a song called "The King of Rock and Roll," and the chorus says, "Hot dog, jumping frog, Albuquerque." I mean, it's like, okay, what's happening? And I remember it came as one of the catchiest pop songs. It's like hot dog, jumping frog, Albuquerque. And it's like, it's the weirdest. And they're talking about, I think the song is about a washed up rock and roll star that kind of had his day. And I still cannot make any sense of those lyrics. And
yet you listen to it and sing along.
You just accept it. It's like you just that's fine. Hot dog, jumping frog. It's like when you hear, a new pop song, you hear a Rihanna song and you're like, well, and it's like, I don't know, but it's great. It works.
They show you their ID as they're getting into the club, and you look at it and you're like, yeah, somehow you can get in. I don't know why. You're not supposed to be here. I can't recognize your face, but just go in.
Just go in. It's fine. Free entry. But it's such a weird, and if you should check out that song, Prefab Sprout, The King of Rock and Roll. It is so catchy and silly, and even they know it's daft. Like they're like, this is a daft song. But I bet they had so much fun writing it, and it was a huge hit for them. Yeah.
Well, and so it's. I mean, you have volleyed so many volleys to me during these 5 hot takes because I've actually talked about this. I talked about it with Red Hot Chili Peppers. And you remember the song? I know it from the Conehead soundtrack, but it was a huge hit. Then I'm no Soda Squeeze. Where I go, I just don't know. There's a part of the song where he literally goes, "Mama don't dang the sang the bone, Mama don't but song the gone with." It was a number 1 in alternative, adult alternative, number 1. And there is gibberish. It's not even words. It's literally just gibberish. And it's, again, you made this point before, why does that work? And why am I, as he sings it, I'm like, yeah, that's fine with me.
I mean, absolutely. It's like, they're not even trying to be cryptic about those words. They put hot dog, jumping frog, Albuquerque. And of course, they're not trying to be like, I'm going to create some atmosphere when they're going to try to work out these words. Like, in Bon Iver, it's like you listen to some of his songs and, there was that brilliant SNL skit where, they do that skit where, Beyonce and Jay-Z have a baby and everyone's coming to visit.
Oh my God.
And Bon Iver is one of the guests. And Jay-Z goes, did he say don't be a muckle? It's like, what's he saying? And it's like I listen to Bon Iver and I'm listening and I'm going, I don't know what those words were, but I feel you're right.
But
absolutely, I should do that. That's what life is. That's happening.
Well, and here is what I wonder. I thought you were going to talk about the Dana Carvey chopping broccoli, SNL skit, which is the same thing. But here's what I wonder. This is what I pontificate with that point. Is I wonder if it does this thing in songwriting where you realize you can't focus on that, so you just focus on everything else. So It's kind of like this, it's sort of smoke and mirrors, because it's like the singer or the songwriter's going, no, this is not the thing to look at right now. Yes. And you just, as a receiver, you're like, yeah, I'm fine with that.
Absolutely.
I can listen, because the rest is, and it's very singable, and I don't really care if you're not. I just know now I'm going to listen to the guitar. I'm going to listen to the melody. I'm going to listen to the drum. And so to me, and I think globally, what I love about it is that it just proves that music serves a million reasons in a million different ways.
Absolutely. It does.
It like serves all these purposes, and you don't need some songs. You don't care. Who cares what you're saying? I just love how it feels. Other songs, I don't care that I don't love this melody because the lyrics are so poignant. Sometimes like this guy's the worst singer in the world, but my gosh, I understand the pain in his life.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think music is always so intoxicating to me, is because it just is so, it's got so many ways to do what it does.
Yeah.
That you're fine with, that you're ultimately like, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, because it's art, and you can't control how people receive these things. That's why I always thought about, when you think about awards, it's like, how is there even a winner? How is there not a winner? How can you compare art? How can you say, because sometimes it's based, obviously things in this industry are based on success, but sometimes it's just based on artistic value, or, the quality of the music. The Grammys, for example, is such a wide range of reasons. And yet, how do you decide? It's like, and because like you say, everybody receives it. I mean, I remember my sister Nikki listening to a song on Letters to Ghost. She was like, what's that one I love? That Disney sounding one. I went, none of them. And she's like, she heard, I mean, I love Disney songs. It's some of my favorite on the planet.
Right.
But and now all I'm trying to write is a dream is a wish. I'm like, all I want to do is write that song. But the way people hear things, she's hearing it in a way that's how her ears receive it. Yeah. And, when I hear an emotion, like a lyric, I mean, that was just a funny lyric, which I'm sure makes perfect sense. And I'm probably not even receiving it right, is how they intended it. But, it's true. The emotion, there's so many reasons you hit onto a song, which is why as an artist, you want to go, well, what do I feel? I've got 26 different personalities. I can't put them all on one album. Yeah. It's like, what am I feeling right now? What's the pause button in my life? What do I want to make right now? And who wants to hear that emotion? And that depends. That's the dependent factor on why someone buys your music.
Well, and I'll say this finally. I think the other thing that's fascinating is there's so many songs growing up I didn't know what the person was saying.
Yeah.
Every time you go, you take a piece of meat with you. And I'm like, but yet I was like, I don't care if that is what he's saying. I just love this song.
Exactly.
And so it doesn't deter from what the purpose is, which is interesting.
Yeah. And Lucie, Man in the Mirror, clear, when he says no message could have been any clearer. That's the lyric, right? And that is obviously the lyric. And yet when I was 10, I was like, no message could have been any clearer. It's like Clibber. And my mom was like, what's Clibber? And I went, I don't know, but that's what he's saying. It's like, I'm like, okay.
And yet it doesn't deter you from enjoying that.
No, I just loved it. And he's like, all these sounds and songs that, lyrics that he had. I was like, I don't know what's happening, but I love it. So,
Lucie, you are a legend.
You're a legend.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much. There's so many we could do, but obviously it's not 10 hot takes.
We'll do a continued.
But I love this. I love, geeking out, if that's what we're doing.
That's all it is.
Over music. It's so much fun. It's so inspiring. It makes you want to just go write a song immediately. And thank you for having me do this.
Yeah, thanks for geeking out with me.
I love it. Anytime.
Dave's 5 Hot Takes. Yeah!